course. Before I get started on my PowerPoint, I wanted to say I grew up in El Centro, which is like 8 miles from Mexicali,
Right.
and so I have a lot. Both two parts of my family arrived there in the teens,
Mhm.
so I have a lot of history, a lot of family down there, and I love the history of Imperial County. So uh, this talk tonight is close to my heart. Okay,
Good. So then
okay.
we'll be extra mean on our questions.
Okay, you can do that. That's fine. So this token that I got this token from Steve Gorman and a friend of his who lived down in Yuma, and it really started kind of uh, a travel for me to try to figure out what it meant. I did write a couple years ago a short article about it in the California Numismatist, but since then I've come up with some more information, and I'm going to share that with you tonight. The token, this is dated 1933, and it is the token that came out 2 years before Mexico got rid of all these guys from Tijuana, Mexicali, and Algodones, just kicked them all out. The ABW syndicate plus the Border Barons syndicate, which I'll talk about in a minute too. So this token came in right before it really stopped, and right at the end of Prohibition. Uh, and it's a cool token. It's got some nicks and dings on it, but the owl is quite cool. And Federico, I heard that you have a couple of tokens for Mexicali. Not these? Oh, okay. Anyway, so the story starts with a guy named Carly L. Carly Withington. Carly is the guy in the corner with the striped pants. He's called the King of Ice out of Bakersfield. And to talk about how he ended up being the King of Ice in Bakersfield, you got to look at his father, Robert Withington, who came from Pittsburgh during the gold rush in 1849. And he did horrible in gold mining, but he ended up making a fortune supplying gold miners with his wagons along the Kern River. And his headquarters was in Bakersfield. And as he made money, he bought lots of land in Bakersfield. And by the late 1890s, Bakersfield oil was discovered. And so he became even more wealthy. His son, Carly, there in the corner with the striped pants, um, uh, he was born in 1875, and by the turn of the century, he had established the Owl Saloon and Dance Parlor and a number of bordellos in the red light district of Bakersfield. This would be the late 1890s that this was going on, and at the same time period that the red light district that he was involved with in Bakersfield was booming, there was a big temperance movement going on in California. And the temperance movement was pushing legislation to outlaw prostitution, gaming, gambling, and alcohol. Now, we all know eventually Prohibition hit, but the law that hit first was in 1912. It was the anti-red light district, anti-prostitution law. And it was a law that had hit other states before California. Actually, Iowa was in 1909 that the law hit. So Carly knew something was coming. It wasn't a surprise. And so in 1911, he went to Mexicali, and he met with a guy named Esteban Cantu. Let me check my notes here. Yes. Now, here is a picture of Esteban. Esteban Cantu uh, came to Mexicali during the revolution. He was actually, it's Colonel Esteban Cantu, and he was quite popular because he really stopped a lot of of revolution occurring in Baja. There were a few skirmishes, but in general, it was a pretty peaceful area during the revolution. He became mayor very quickly of Mexicali, and in 1915 to 1920, he was governor. Now, when Worthington arrived in 1911, he made a deal with Esteban to pay him $8,000 a month for the rights of the red light district of Mexicali, Tijuana, and Algodones. And that was a lot of money back then. And fortunately for Mexico, for Mexicali, he spent a lot of that money on roads, schools, government buildings, and hospitals. And he also established a health program for the prostitutes, both health health service and treatment. And the other thing that made him quite popular in Mexicali and in Baja California was that he required most of the employees to be Mexican citizens. So it was it was a financial deal that it was making. Now, did he become wealthy from it too? Yes. Fortunately, a good friend of mine, Celeste Cantu, his granddaughter, is a good friend. She was the director of housing, the housing authority of Imperial County. And my mother worked for her for a long time, so we're very close. And I was able to talk a bit about her grandfather, and he liked to be called Colonel. And once he was out of office in 1920, it was a bit contentious. Abelito Rodriguez was sent in, and there was discussion of a battle and stuff, but Esteban said no, and he left and went to the United States, and he lived in the United States till 1966 when he died. Celeste is now on the board, the San Diego Water Quality Board. She's an expert on water. She got that position through Sacramento, and she's still involved in it. So that was really helpful for me when I was doing the research. This is kind of what the border looked like way back in the early turn of the century. The Mexicali side, you can't hardly read it, but it's the closest to us, and Calexico was on the other side. So this is sort of where it looked like when Carly arrived in 1911. Oh, excuse me. This is what he established. Now remember, in Bakersfield, he had the Owl Saloon and Dance Parlor. Well, he set up the Owl in Mexicali, and this was huge. It was a huge place. Here's the inside picture of it. It's almost like a big barn, but says down here, the Owl. Federico can help me with this. Is El Tocolote, the Owl, right? Mexicali, Mexico, the largest gambling house in the world. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but and then there's this picture, and this is an interesting picture. It says the Owl Mexicali, a pan game, which is a gambling game. But down in the corner, you'll see this. It says Zuckerman Brothers, copyright, and it just so happens there they are, the Zuckerman Brothers. Now this is listed in Cap'n. It's brass, 21 millimeter. My take on it is the Zuckerman Brothers were a photography firm. Interesting, they're not in the early Imperial County history books, but then not much about ABW is mentioned either. I think it's kind of something that wasn't talked about a lot because of what it was. Anyway, so this piece has a connection to ABW. In 1915, there was the earthquake down there, and this is what happened to the Owl Cafe. So what happened after this is Carly set up the ABW syndicate by bringing in two people. Marvin Allen, he was from Tennessee and an expert in alcohol distribution. Um, uh, uh, the other person he brought in was Marvin Allen, who he had worked with. I mean, excuse me, he had worked with Marvin Allen in Bakersfield at his operation there, so he knew him. Marvin Allen was a very wealthy guy, and he came in as a partner. The other person he brought in was Frank Booze Buyer. Uh, uh, Again, he considered himself a philanthropist because he was quite wealthy and he was a flamboyant card shark. So what happened is while Carly took over the Bardello, Marvin Allen supplied all the alcohol to all the operations that they had going, not only in Mexicali, but a number of locations in Tijuana, pre Agua Caliente, and then also later in Algodones. Um, uh, Frank Booze Byard lived in San Ysidro. Um, Here's a picture of Frank Booze Buyer. He's in the center next to the lady in white. He was light. I read an article about him where he was funding a library in San Ysidro. He considered himself a philanthropist or one that gave money to good causes. Uh, Obviously, you can have your own opinion about how good of a guy he was or not, but that was him. So the three of them, they split up the duties. One was alcohol distribution, one was gambling, and the other one was prostitution. Um, so they came in and they put together, well, here's what the border looked like a little bit later. Okay, the border crossing. And on this case, you have Calexico on this side and Mexicali on the other side. And you can see that sign in the back is the ABW sign. And here it is. This was the rebuilt ABW Club. So it's no longer just the Tecolote. It's now the ABW Club, also still known as the Owl. Okay. This is what it looked like at night when it was lit up. This is what it looked like inside. Really, really quite an upgrade from the earlier Owl that was built. Very large, very large. I think the number of prostitutes they had in Mexicali alone was several hundred. And they had different bordellos. It was still segregated. So they had bordellos for African Americans and they had bordellos for whites. Um, but again, most of the employees were Mexican citizens. Here are some Al gambling chips. I don't really collect gambling chips, but I had these and I found these on the research about ABW, so I wanted to show them to you. This is one of the menus from the ABW, the Owl. And the whole menu is not here, but this is what it looked like. The theme was always the Owl. It was always the Owl. This was the ABW Club matchbooks and the token. So Withington died in 1925. This is 8 years before this token came out. So ABW had been taken over after he passed away. There's a group called the Border Barons, and I'll show you a picture of them in a minute. They established a company called the Mexican Development Company, which took over all the ABW clubs in Tijuana, Mexicali, and Algodones. They made Marvin Allen and Byers partners, but very quickly they were not the shot callers anymore. The four border barons took over. Cantu was gone. He left in 20. oh God, I can't pronounce his name. There was a governor, Arbelito Rodriguez, that came in 1923, and he was the fourth border baron. Here are the border barons. So you have James Crofton, the first person on the left. He was born in 1895 in Washington State. He ended up in 1915 working at the Panama Exposition in San Diego, and this is what got him so interested in the what they call vice tourism in Tijuana. He went down there, and with his money he started buying shares in the developing the development of the Agua Caliente, which became the Riviera of the West. Um, uh, he worked for Barnum and Bailey Circus for a year until World War I. Then he went to work in San Francisco at the Naval Shipyard. After the war, he would return to San Diego, and he was hired by Frank Booz Buyer of the ABW at the Sunset Inn. And that's one of the big operations of the ABW in Tijuana. The second person, Wirt Bowman, was born in 1869, so he's a bit older. He grew up on a cotton plantation in Mississippi, but he ended up working in the railroad, and he ended up being the superintendent of terminal superintendent in Nogales, Arizona during the Revolution. And during that time, he married a well-connected Mexican woman connected to politics that would later help them when they were running Agua Caliente and all of the ABW operation. He's the one that had very key political connections in Mexico, including several of the presidents. The third person here is the track manager, John Miller, I believe. He's not one of the border barons. He was just working for them. Baron Long is the fourth person, certainly the wealthiest. He was a hotel owner, and he ran the very successful first all-night club in Vernon outside of the Los Angeles city limits. The club was popular with the Hollywood elite. Fatty Arbuckle, Wallace Reed, Mary Pickford, D.W. Griffith were regulars. In 1915, they were raided and shut down because of the red light, the 1912 Anti-Prostitution Act. In 1919, Baron Long bought San Diego's landmark hotel, the Grant, and he had interest in the existing Tijuana racetrack and the Sunset Inn with Frank Byers and the ABW. But building the Agua Caliente was his passion, and that occurred in the 20s. When Withington passed away, the border barons, James Crofton, Wirt Bowman, Baron Long, and eventually Governor I'm not pronouncing this right, Abelardo Rodriguez would take over all ABW syndicate properties in Mexicali, Tijuana, Algodones. And while Marvin Allen and Frank Booz Byers were partners, they were not shot callers any longer. So here is the governor of Baja California, or the fourth border baron. He became governor in 1923, but he arrived in Mexicali in 1920. And he also was president of Mexico from 1932 to 1934. So he was a well-connected guy. And again, very popular because all these operations had Mexican citizens working for them, and it was really about the money. And there was so much money that these guys were generating through Agua Caliente and all these other operations, that when the local government and even the federal government of Mexico needed funds for something, they were one of the places they went to for money. and that kind of kept them in control of what was going on in terms of what's called vice tourism. So um, Rodriguez was born in 1889. He was governor from 23 to 1930 and president from 32 to 34. And in 35, there was a new president that came in and really just kicked them all out. Everything was gone. And now any vice that continued was Mexican based. Here is some flyers from Agua Caliente, and it has, how to get there from air, sea, land, and highway. And this is, I don't know, it talks about the racing track. The racing track was finished in 1929. By 1929, all of Hollywood was going down there. Agua Caliente and the Agua Caliente racetrack was compared to the Riviera. It was that popular, and Hollywood was there, and um, uh, one of the famous restaurants was a restaurant called Fior dell'Italia. It was opened by a guy named Alex Cardini, and he served many of the famous like Rudolph Valentino, Clark Gable, W.C. Fields, and tough guy James Cagney. Alex was a big experimenter with salads, and he mixed a salad with Parmesan cheese, coddled egg, garlic, olive oil, lemon juice, anchovy, and seasoning poured over lettuce and croutons, and he called it the aviator salad. Anybody recognize that salad? Caesar salad. It was popular, and he renamed it in honor of his brother Caesar. Now, that's a story. That comes from a book called Satan's Playground that talks mostly about Agua Caliente, but it does reference pre-Agua Caliente and the ABW Club. Okay, here is the track when it was finished in 1929. Here is an announcement of the new ABW Club in Algodones. The date in handwriting down here on a stamp is 1926. March 13th, 1926, when this opened. So again, they kept the ABW Club, the Owl, all that. They kept all that, even though Worthington was gone, and those three guys were no longer in control. Here's an article when Al Capone visited the El Tocolote in Mexicali. Also, when Agua Caliente was going on in the late 20s, Bugsy Siegel spent a lot of time there before he went to Las Vegas and set up what he was doing going to Las Vegas. So these guys were not East Coast mobsters, Italian mafia, or things like that. They were entrepreneurs, vice entrepreneurs that were very wealthy, and they interacted with some of these guys. And of course, being in Mexico is different, so it's not like the mob could come in and do the same thing. Here are some of the clubs in Tijuana that belonged to ABW before Withington passed away, and then passed on to the Mexican Development Company and the Border Barons. The Foreign Club, this is the Monte Carlo and Sunset Inn. You can see the sign along. These are all along the border between San Diego and Tijuana. And this is the San Francisco Cafe and the Trivoli Bar. All big operations, but nothing compared to Agua Caliente. Agua Caliente is just in a league of its own. Now, what's the connection to Imperial County? Well, this is the new information. I told you about Celeste Cantu, my friend. She went to a conference late last year to the University of Arizona. They were discussing water and the Colorado River and the three or four states that are dealing with this. California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado. And the university brought out a photo album. So here's the owl in El Centro. It only closed in 2010, but it really I always thought it was part of ABW because of the owl and so it just made sense, but I couldn't prove it. Well, here is the token from the owl, unlisted. It's not in Cap'n. I got this again from Steve Gorman. This is what they showed Celeste at the University of Arizona, and it is still there. It's a photo album, and she looked through it quickly. She actually asked them, "Where'd you get this at?" It's to my father. How did you end up with it? And she didn't get the answer, uh, but she wasn't. She was just curious about it more than anything else. This is the picture that she found in the album. This is at a rodeo. It says all roads lead to the Owl Cafe, Allen Byers Withington proprietors. That's the evidence. So the owl in El Centro was part of ABW, and the owl in Westmoreland. This was a picture that Lloyd Wagner took in the token catalog. So it's a real poor picture, but it says Owl Amusement Parlor, Westmoreland, California, good for 5 cents in trade. And in Calexico, there's the Owl Ranch, was owned by Marvin Owl. So what was going on is these people, these syndicate owners had operations on both sides of the border, obviously to bring money back, I am assuming. And that's my story about the owl.